Hi, writers. It's Misty W with something else that you can write in your quarantine journal. Today, I thought we would focus on writing about our setting. Now, from all the work you've done in Readers and Writers Workshop, you know that the setting is the time and the place that a story occurs. And when you're thinking about the time and a place, the time doesn't have to just be the hour or the minute that something's happening or even the season, but it can be a historic time period. And right now, we're living in the historic time period of COVID-19. So it will be very important for you to document what does your setting look like now that you're learning from home and you are under quarantine. And I think what's so interesting about this is that all over the world, we're all experiencing the coronavirus, but we're all living in different places. We're living in cities, we're living in different countries, we're living in rural areas. So documenting the time and place that you live will be very, very interesting for you to read about when you grow up and for historians to read about in the future, because as we talked about, the purpose of our journal is to create a source document for historians to read to learn about this unique time period later on. Another thing I think that we should document when we're talking about our setting is what's outside of our window. Because when we look out of our window, we see a lot of interesting things. For example, every morning when I look out of my window, I see hummingbirds um, sucking the nectar out of the honeysuckle outside of my window. So before we start this work, there's a couple of things that you're going to need to write down in your journal. The first is, where are you? Where do you live? Do you live in a house? Do you live in an apartment? If you live in an apartment, do you live on the top floor? Because your view, your perspective will be much different than if you live on the bottom floor, right? Where exactly do you live? And then once you've written down where you live, you want to start thinking about what do you see? What do you see when you look around the space you're living and outside of your window? And I think it's also important to talk about what you hear. Like I said, I always see those hummingbirds outside my window. I also hear a lot more birds than I normally do. And I think that's because there's less noise outside, because there's less people outside, there's less work going on. And so I'm able to hear the birds at much greater volume during the quarantine. And I also think writing about what you smell could be very interesting for your um, to document your setting. For example, right now there's a red tide and we live close to the beach, and I can smell that tide that's creating the bioluminescence that maybe some of you guys have seen. It's a very strong smell. I can smell the ocean smell all the way up to my house. So one of the things that I'm noticing when I look outside my window are the trees. Right outside of my window, I have a lot of trees, and they're all mostly green, but I have one tree that's an apricot tree, and it's just starting to blossom. And I'm starting to see different colors on the tree, little white flowers, and I'm starting to notice little leaves because it didn't have leaves before. All the leaves had already fallen down, and now that it's springtime, it's growing back. So when you're writing your setting, it's really important to notice those small details. Don't just write, I see trees outside, but what colors are they? What do the leaves look like? Like I said before, I'm seeing birds and I'm hearing birds outside my window. Tons of hummingbirds with red chests. I'm wondering if you're seeing a lot more birds as well. That's something you can write about. I'm also seeing a lot more flowers, like especially when I walk through my neighborhood, but even outside my window, I've noticed, like just in my front of my house, I see a lot of dandelions that have started to blossom. And I see different flowers that are starting to sprout because it's springtime. Another thing I'm noticing are animals. There's so many more squirrels. Sometimes they even come in our yard. And unfortunately, I also see a lot more mice everywhere that are trying to eat my garden, which I don't appreciate. Every time I plant strawberries, they start eating them. I'm wondering if you're seeing any more animals. Maybe dogs that are walking by your house, or more birds, or anything else. Another thing I'm noticing is the people outside my window. And I'm noticing that the people that walk past me are either two kinds of people when I look out my window. They're either people that are doing recreation, that means that they're trying to have some fun, like they're riding a bike or they're taking a walk or going on a scooter ride, or they're workers. They're people who are delivering my mail or delivering packages or delivering food. I'm also noticing that the people that walk by are all wearing masks. Maybe you're noticing the same thing. Another thing I see outside my window in my setting are different kinds of vehicles. I'm especially seeing a lot more bikes than I've seen before. People seem to be riding bikes like crazy now, but I see a lot fewer cars. Less people are driving. I do see a lot of delivery trucks. And the last thing that I might add to my setting are the buildings. If I have room for this, outside of my window, there are a lot of buildings. There's a lot of apartment buildings. There's a couple little cottages, but mostly buildings that I see. Do you see any buildings outside of your window? Finally, you might want to take a look around your house. What has changed inside of your house? For example, where have you set up your virtual school? Do you have a little nook that you want to write about? Did you set up your own desk or your own book box? Those are things that you could include in your setting. So writers, please go take a minute, get those writer's glasses on, take a look around your house, take a look outside of your window, and document your setting. This will be important for you as you look back in years to come when you read your quarantine journal. Off you go.